This is part 3 of chapter 9. We're reading from The Rape of the Mind by Just A.M. Relu, M.D. Man is subject to the same biological rule of defense. When life is too complex for him, he often turns the clock of civilization back and becomes primitive again. A sudden disintegration and breakdown of functions may occur. This form of regressive behavior is common in children. When they are frightened, they often revert to baby talk or to bedwetting. In the bombed areas during the Second World War, many girls in their late teens started to play with their dolls again. Even seemingly mature, hyper-sophisticated men and women may display thousands of symptoms of this return to infantilism when fear attacks them. Their symptoms are not always as dramatic as the examples above. Nevertheless, they are symptoms of fear. When grown people begin to stutter and to lose their daily decorum, when they take to carrying around special protective charms, when they invent stories about their magic invulnerability, when they boast more, eat more cake and candy, whistle more, talk more, cry more, and lose their formal stiff and staid behavior, they are acting out of fear. During the Second World War, in the prison camps and the air raid shelters, people really got to know each other, as do children in the playpen who have the simple intuitive gift of knowing whom they can trust. In our age of anxiety, we feel possessed by the same frightening shadows that once haunted the Stone Age man, and we may react to them by acting more like our simpler ancestors. Camouflage and disguise. A different pattern is that of camouflage and disguise, playing hide-and-seek with fate. This useful, protective trickery is often seen in lower animals who temporarily acquire the form of color of their environment. It is just like military camouflage. Everybody is acquainted with the color changes of the chameleon, and there are many other animals which are able to change their skin or body form in times of danger. Yet many people are not aware that human skin too shows rudimentary attempts at camouflage. The phenomenon of goose flesh resembles the reaction of a frightened bristling cat. Sudden graying of the hair or discoloration of the skin, which is known technically as fear melanosis, changes our outer color. During the Second World War, I went with a first aid team to Rotterdam after the city had been heavily bombed. As we looked at the people, our first impression was that they were all wearing masks. Their skin was wrinkled and showed a typical camouflage reaction. They were all still badly frightened. It was as if they were hiding from the tremendous hell of fire that had been thrown down on them. There is a psychological parallel to these physical reactions. It is called the feign or faint pattern. Actual psychology looks at both reactions, feigning and fainting, as a passive retreat from reality. This reaction is comparable to shell shock or battle neurosis, the study of which is one of the most absorbing chapters of medicine. Soldier and civilian alike can go into a state of mental paralysis. In such a state, the victim becomes apathetic. He is unable to talk or to move. No dangerous reality exists for him anymore. He looks dead. Only his frightened, burning eyes seem alive. This death attitude or cataleptic reaction often has a completely terrifying effect on bystanders. There is nothing so contagious as fainting in any crowded place. It is of the utmost importance to realize how passive, paralyzed, indifferent, and submissive people can become under circumstances which should demand the utmost activity. The totalitarians are making use of man's passive reaction to terror when they put their prisoners into huge concentration camps with only a few guards. They are gambling that the reaction of passivity will keep the victim from rebelling or trying to escape. Like the bird which stands stock still when the snake approaches, man may surrender passively to what he dreads and fears in order to get rid of the tension of anticipation. The thief who surrenders to the police because he cannot stand the tension and insecurity of not knowing when he will be found out is an obvious example. The psychological camouflage reaction lies behind emotional shock and silent panic, the mental paralysis that overcomes some people when they can no longer cope with the circumstances in which they find themselves. Passive surrender to what he fears is one of man's most common reactions to sudden danger. It is not limited to pathological personalities. It occurs much more frequently than wild and overt panic and displays itself in numerous subtle behavior mechanisms. People may escape into complaints about physical disease. They may take refuge in very important pseudo-tasks and hobbies. They may deny real danger in a seemingly self-securing complacency. They become obstinate and disobedient. Nothing can activate them. They are not interested in politics, they say. Some will try to sell to themselves and others a paralyzing theory of hopelessness and the inevitability of doom. But don't talk about the nuclear bomb. Others will throw themselves into the oblivion of excessive drinking or hide themselves in long, pointless conferences. Every man has his own psychological magnet line. Is it magnet or magno? Magnet line. A mental fortress that he believes inviolable. We used to call this the ostrich policy, and the ostrich policy is one of the most dangerous strategies in the world. Beware the totalitarian who preaches peace. His intention may be to push the world into passive surrender to that which it fears. The cult of passivity and so-called relaxation is one of the most dangerous developments of our times. Essentially, it too may represent a camouflage pattern, the double wish not to see the dangers and challenges of life and not to be seen. We cannot escape all the tensions that surround us. They are part of life, and we have to learn to cope with them adequately and to use our leisure time for more creative and gratifying activities. Silent, lonely relaxation with alcohol, sweets, and the television screen, or a murder mystery may soothe the mind into passivity that may gradually make it vulnerable to the seductive ideology of some feared enemy. Denying the danger of totalitarianism through passivity may gradually surrender to its blandishments those who were initially afraid of it. Explosive panics. Most people are far more familiar with the explosive motor reactions we call panic and stampede than they are with the other fear reactions. This is what we call mass hysteria, the chacun pour soi reaction. The baby has its temper tantrums. The older people have their uncontrolled fury and fight or flight reactions. Although we usually think of the word panic as describing such phenomena as a hysterical stampede out of a burning theater or the flight of whole populations in terror, there are many subtle steps that lead from the first symptoms of unrest we all feel when something is threatening to the great outbursts of crying and running and fighting we see in severe panics. Man shows many forms of panicky, frenzied behavior, epileptic fits as in trench or war epilepsy, fury, rage, self-destruction, criminal aggression, running amok, deserting from the army, rioting, uncontrolled impulsiveness, breakneck speed in driving. A soldier in a state of panic may behave like an angry child. He may attack his friends or shoot at the members of his own troop. In panic, civilians may begin to cry, shout, walk aimlessly about, wringing their hands, or they may shout and scold or cry for help. The panicky person spreads panic every time he shouts. He incites others to run. Panic is never a question of crude strength or failing energy, but rather a lack of inner structure, of a failing capacity to organize. The panicky leader hesitates to use the powers entrusted to him. The child with temper tantrums lies deep within all of us. The more mysterious and unaccountable the danger, the more primitive our reactions may be. Riots, furious mass movements, and outbreaks of criminality serve to increase fear and panic, and thus can be used to deepen man's sense of insecurity and further his passive surrender to the totalitarian environment. Any terroristic regime compels its victims to repress the reactions of rebellion and anger. The more these reactions are repressed, the more the victims develop tremendous inner rage, which may bide its time and wait until it is permitted some socially sanctioned form of explosion. War is often such a universal panic, a mass discharge of accumulated internal rage. Here, too, the inner fears of mankind are discharged in mass destruction. And that's where I'll stop. This was part 3. I think this was part 3 of chapter 9. We're in the Rape of the Mind by Juste A.M. Merleau, M.D. And I will see you in the next video.